Mamta. Mamta is the wife of Andy Landerman, so she's been suffering through living with a dentist for over 20 years and is still here. And that was only possible by using her own skills on herself. She's both a practitioner and a teacher of Ayurvedic medicine, but also clairvoyant and has some other gifts that often seem to come along with this healing method and philosophy. So Mamta, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a couple of disclaimers here to make before I start. One is that I do not practice medicine without a license, and a lot of things that I might say about Ayurveda is about the possibility of Ayurveda and how it is practiced in India. I will speak about some of the things that are possible here, and there may be things that are available to dentists and doctors to do that I may not personally be able to do. The other disclaimer that I have is that I had some of my teeth removed. So here I am at a dental convention with my husband, a dentist, and I am not wearing my teeth in the side. And I told him, Andy, I don't have my teeth and I'm going to be talking because I'm not comfortable with them yet. So very sweetly, the kapha that he is, he said, now you do what you're comfortable with and don't worry about the rest of it. So you have a speaker here at a dental convention and I don't have my side teeth.
You have nice front teeth, though.
I have nice front teeth, yes. They cover. How many of you are familiar with Ayurveda? Okay. What the word means, it's a Sanskrit term, and it means the wisdom of life. Ayus is wisdom, and Veda, Veda means wisdom, and Ayus is life. So it's referring to the wisdom of everything that is alive and that passes through linear time. Ayurveda tracks what happens to life as it passes through linear life. It is a very old paradigm, a 5,000-year paradigm, has a history, proven history. In fact, Ayurveda has been getting rejuvenated, resurging today. And as science has gone to gathered a certain critical mass with its awareness, people started to ask more questions. Homeopathy has emerged, which has some basis in Ayurveda. It's often called the mother of healing sciences. Plastic surgery came from Ayurveda. They had 5,000 years ago did surgery. There are recorded instruments of surgery in Ayurveda. And as people have been asking the questions, acupuncture has been coming into this country. It has been a natural occurrence now for Ayurveda to come in because it so ties in all of the various philosophies that are available to people. You'll find it's like the sum of the parts are greater. What is that saying? Does anybody know that? What you're finding is that different sciences have brought in a certain awareness, and what Ayurveda is doing now is tying it all together, these parts available. Sitting today and yesterday through so many talks, I was so aware of how many things that Ayurveda says are being proven by science. In Chernobyl, in Russia, when they had the Chernobyl disaster, they found that the Panchakarma detox method was one of the most effective for the people there. And they're now in the process of recognizing Ayurveda as a medical science, not a healing art, but as a medical science. So much of what it says is now coming into the consciousness of the modern mind. So what I have been noticing and how people have been presenting the different topics is often we look at what is perceptible, and then we have to prove in a certain language today of that which is perceptible. So we're talking about the percept. What has been happening beyond that is now people are beginning to talk about the process. The video films that we saw yesterday showed us a window into a process of what people go through before something becomes perceptible. What Ayurveda also does is it takes into account the being that is going through the process, and then what is it that we perceive. When you are dealing with people, you're not only looking at the signs and symptoms of disease, you take the nature of the disease, you also take the nature of the remedy that will match the particular problem. But very important, you also take the nature of the person that you are treating, because the 3 people will come in with a headache, and you will give the 3 of them completely different remedies. They have the same symptom. You have remedies for headaches, but because they are 3 different individuals, they will be using 3 completely different herbs that will be effective on them. And so the nature of the person is extremely, extremely important. And you know, this is something that we take for granted in our daily life. You know, each of you that have been practicing for so long, pretty much you know when that person walks in what kind of a personality they're going to be, don't you? By now. Most of you know that. This is incorporated in Ayurveda. You have to take that, or sometimes you will have the exact opposite effect of what that remedy is recommended for. One of the things that in Ayurveda they talk about is that there is a Sanskrit term for the physical body called, I'll just say it, but don't worry about taking it down. It says Annamaya Kosha. What this means is a food covering. It's a food sheath. This is the word for the physical body. And the reason that is so is because there is nothing, in Ayurveda, there is nothing in this physical body that is not made up because of food being converted into the physical body. It goes through various transformations, it goes through various enzymatic fires, but there is nothing in here that is not made up from the fruits of the earth. And this is why there is such a dramatic emphasis on food, on diet, and on herbs, because that is the origin of what this body is made up of. And moreover, as we take that food in, it goes through a certain process. As it goes through a process, it goes through a certain transformation. And as we expel it, what we are expelling is now being infused into the earth with the intelligence of having gone through a certain transformation. And what this means is that what is then composting into the earth has come in with a certain live impulse of the human being that is injected into the earth. And you find the earth then having and composting, and the energetics and the potentizing of the earth begins to change with how the potentizing of the human being and the vibrational changes and experiences that the person goes through. The human being is constantly metabolizing experiences as food, as emotions. We have our 5 senses, and it is through these 5 senses that we take in the experiences. But in order for us to eat that carrot that has grown out into the earth, we have to first warm it. We have to warm it, and we warm it with our 5 senses. If I give you a carrot which has all the dirt in it and it's really thick, and you look at it and you go, I'm going to have to eat that, you're not going to want to eat it. But if I take it and I wash it and I cut it and I put it on a beautiful plate with a little garnish on it, you might go, I want to eat that. That is a sense that is working. That is a sense that is beginning to change your digestion. Your juices are beginning to flow. How you're going to eat that carrot and how you're going to absorb it has a very big impact on how your tissues are going to be made. And a lot of times with all of the stress that we go through in life, we really don't absorb the food because we, first of all, don't even warm our experiences. All we do is, stop at the health food, get the health food sandwich, sit in the traffic jam and eat it while listening to CBS, And there is no warming of an experience that you are taking in. And unless you warm it, you are not going to accept it. And if you do not accept it, you cannot absorb it. And if you cannot absorb it, all of your own forces cannot act onto that carrot. And the carrot will remain a half-digested item in your system, malabsorbed. And the very thing that was going to give you the nutrition and the nourishment and the energy to go on in life now becomes a toxin that your body has to act against. And we know this not only in food, but in any experience that we take in through our five senses. A bad relationship. The very relationship that was to nurture and to fulfill you then remains a half-metamorphosed experience. And it stays like that. And there is a word in Sanskrit for this half-digested experience that resides in the body, and it's called ama, A-M-A. Oh. So, right, you won't forget that. It's a good thing it's not called ADA. But, ama is basically a half-digested experience. And it's food, it's on many different levels. It then begins to be toxic in the body. Everything that our senses take in on a very subtle level and on a gross level is made up, like in Chinese acupuncture and Oriental medicine, of 5 elements. And these 5 elements are earth, air, water, fire, and ether. Ether is space. It is space that has the potential of all the 5 elements, all the other 4 elements that dissolve back into ether when they go formless, and when they derive into form, they come out in as the different elements. We all know earth, air, water, fire, and ether on a gross level, but these also exist on a very subtle level. So for example, in thought, when you're thinking, if you have a lot of the earth element in your mental psyche, you're going to then manifest it as being a very rigid person. And we know what that means mentally, don't we? And we use those terms. We already know this. We say so-and-so is so fluid. They're so fluid, such a fluid personality, they just flow through things. Or someone's really hot. Or we use these 5 element qualities all the time. We say it's such sweet love. And that's because these elements mix and match. Now, as these elements mix and match, they create certain forces. They release a force that comes out of the chemistry of them mixing. So when earth and water mix, it's like clay and water. When it mixes, what happens? It creates a cohesion. And suddenly you have material that you can build with. This is why when we eat, we're eating that carrot, but it is constantly, it is structured, it is earth, come from the earth, but it has some water inherent in it. And then our saliva is constantly mixing with it, and there is a cohesiveness that begins to happen that is generated from the very action of earth and air and water mixing. And this begins to create a force. Normally, if you take sand and you take water, they're going to not mix. They'll just stay separate. But the force that mixes these, generated from the churning of it, is called kapha. And on your little yellow sheets that I've given, that word is there, K-A-P-H-A, kapha. Kapha has the qualities of cohesion. It has earth and water and lubrication in it. And so it needs, what it does is it constantly builds. It's constantly building. If this kapha force was not in us, we would not have tissues that would be coming together to build, that would be combining to build. It's a force that is very prevalent in children because their bodies are growing, the body is needing to be made, and you're going to find a lot of kapha force with it, which is earth and water. Now, if there's excess earth and water element, then this force is in excess, and you end up with too much cohesion that is being given out from the body, which in a physical level exists in the form of mucus. There's too much mucus. So what do you find? What kinds of complaints do children who have too much kapha have for the most part? What kinds of problems do children have? They always come home with runny noses, don't they? They're usually going through kapha type problems. If you look at fire and water, the elements and how they combine, they're two opposite forces in the body that are always looking to dominate. One dominates the other, and depending on which one is dominating, you start to have problems along those levels if it goes in excess. But earth and water, fire and water need to be balanced, and the force that is given of these opposite forces, fire is hot, fire rises, fire is light, it's sharp, it has a certain quality in it. Water, on the other hand, is very flowing, it has what you call a dullness to it, it has a darkness. If you have a lot of water, it becomes dark. It flows down, it follows the laws of gravity. Fire defies that. So these are opposing forces in our body that are always working. And the force that is given out of fire and water is called pitta. And pitta, for the most part, has the nature of fire. It isn't only just fire, it's very important to remember it has water in it, but it has the nature of fire. So when you have too much of this force being generated, then you end up with a lot of fire problems, such as inflammations, infections, volatile emotions. There's too much fire, that liver is getting hot. It resides mostly, it resides in many different levels, but has a propensity for the liver. The other force that gets generated is when air and ether combine, and that's called the vata force, V-A-T-A. It's air and ether in space that combine. The nature of this is mobility. It has the nature of air, which moves. It creates mobility. And vata is said to be responsible for about 80% of the problems. Now, I remember yesterday, they were talking about those little, the myoplasmas, and how they take on the lipids from the host cell. Yesterday, they were talking about that. And this is what happens when there is too much vata force. Vata is air, and what does air do? When we wash clothes and we put it out, why do we put it out? To dry, yes. So the nature of vata is constantly to dry. It's the movement that creates this dryness, and it's constantly drying. Now, vata force is very important because if it wasn't for this force being generated, nothing could go into the cell wall or come outside of a cell. So if you were to take, on a microcosmic level, a cell, you would say that the very structure of the cell is made up of the kapha force, which is the structure, the tissue, the earth and water, and has the lipids in it. And the metabolism that takes place within a cell is the pitta force. And the force that moves things in and out of the cell is a vata force. Now, these elements, these forces are generated out of the combination of elements, but they're generated also from our activities. If you have too much movement, what force are you going to have in excess? You're going to have too much vata. This means that there's going to be more movement that is accelerated and going faster than the metabolism is capable of the person. And so you're going to find things are going in, out faster and beginning to dry things. Walls are getting destroyed, cells are getting destroyed, cancer is on the onset, things are hyped up, quick growth stuff is beginning to happen. And once it starts to get dry, then the body goes into a response to release some more things to compensate for all of that. And then you can have even problems like things are too dry, the nose is too dry, and then the body compensates with the kapha force to balance it, and then you find a stuffy nose. So these levels, these forces are always in a dance moving through the body. They're not only inside our body, they're in our whole environment. You're going to find in the seasons, you're going to find a kapha season, a vata season, because the elements at that time are very strong. Now, if there is a dry, summer, hot season, what force is going to be more prevalent at that time? It's going to be more of a pitta force. On the other hand, if it's raining and tropical, you're going to find a lot of kapha. The dry desert is vata causing. Now you find people saying today that, you know, I've got arthritis, I'm going to go live not near the ocean. They're really talking about these forces. This is not a theory. This is an observation of the phenomenon of the microclimate and the macroclimate and the whole ecosystem within the body and outside the body. Yeah.
Just a simple question. If somebody is a vata type, would he do especially well in the desert or especially bad?
Well, you tell me. If you have somebody who has a vata condition and they have a lot of air and ether, and you add more air and ether, what's going to happen? They're going to have more air and ether.
When they have a condition, but when they're constitutionally that type, would they still be doing better than living by the ocean?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think in Ayurveda, it's a little opposite to homeopathy, where in homeopathy, like cures like. But you see, you're giving it in a homeopathic dose. In Ayurveda, it's like increases like, and opposites reduce one another. So if you have too much water and your shirt is too wet, you put it out in the air, you give it the opposite force, and then it dries it. And because we're talking of the gross manifestations, you're always using the opposite qualities to balance things out. So a vata person going into the desert will be dead meat soon. You know, they just can't take that level. Likewise, a kapha person, you know, just all the doshas go that way. When we're looking in, not only are we looking at these three forces, there's a word for it called doshas, D-O-S-H-A-S. That's what these three forces are called. You'll often hear the tridosha theory in Ayurveda, and that's what they're talking about. You're not only talking about the three doshas, but because of the different elements, there are certain potencies inherent in items. For example, you can have food that is vata producing food because it is very light, such as popcorn. It's very light, it's full of air, isn't it? And so you give it to a person who is a vata constitution and it's just going to exacerbate the problem. But a kapha person who has a lot of earth and a lot of water, they need some of that light food, and that will help them balance out the forces. I want to go over very briefly, I just want to keep track of time for a second, excuse me. Okay. what are some of the typical qualities of the three doshas, the three forces? How do you spot them? So a Vata person who has a lot of air and ether, and what is the primary function of air is to move, isn't it? Is mobility. So what you're going to find when you look at a Vata type personality is that you're going to find they move a lot. You tell them to sit, they'll be shaking their leg. Or you may find that they've got to do 10 things. They don't quite finish anything because before they finish something, they're already thinking about the next thing. Their mind is going faster than their body is going. In an imbalanced state, this can happen a lot. The other thing is their mind is going so fast that they can't go to sleep because the mind is chattering. Then you put them with a kapha who talks slowly and deliberately. They've got earth and water mixing, and Vata will get 2 words in between while the kapha is breathing. You know, they're always interrupting and getting in there. So you should watch my husband and I talking sometimes. I don't mean to box us in. We all are combinations of different constitutions. Vata, this movement can create a lot of problems. It creates too much, too quick, too little. So the typical person with Vata constitution will be a slim person, usually very tall or very short. They are never one thing. They're very variable. You ask them, do you do this? What time do you get up? Well, sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that. You know, they're always doing the sometimes thing. They have a hard time deciding because they're ready to go. However, when a Vata person is in balance, they're extremely creative. They're very generative because they have that fresh prana in them, the air, and they see, they're visionaries. They are also very unattached people. They want to do things on their own, very independent people. They're the artists also. That's what a Vata personality is like. How is that useful to you? That is useful in the sense that when a Vata personality comes in, you know that you cannot give them something to say, now you do this at 9, you do it at 12, you do it at 1, you do it at 5, and don't do it at 5 after 5. They will get so anxious that they will stress out before they ever take the remedy because they're so afraid they're going to blow it that they prefer not to take it at all. And that's what you're going to run up with a Vata type personality. They are air. They have no structure of their own. They're always needing a structure. They're always needing the support of somebody. In chronic problems, we end up with a Vata condition, and you'll find that people with chronic problems are always needing support. Yesterday, when we saw the video, you saw how much that lady was supported. She had to be supported, or she could not have gone on. She had no structure of her own. She had an inner will. And this is a very important thing in Ayurveda that you look at, is when a person comes in, you're always looking to see where their will is. So a person will come and say, you know, well, I've got this problem, I've had pain for 10 years, and I had an accident, and I had 4 whiplashes, and I broke my collarbone 25 times, and then I had this thing happen to my foot, and I've got ulcerative problems here, and, you know, they go on with these long histories. And they're telling you what's wrong with them. But remember that you have to look at the nature of the problem, the nature of the solution, and you have to look at the nature of the person. And so in that personality where they've got all the negations, my stomach is not working because I have this, my collarbone is not right, my meridians are spoiled because of this, my root canals did this, they are putting their emphasis on the problems. You have to put your emphasis on them. Who is this person? Who is this person? You know, if I was that person, I would be dead long ago. But this person has had a will that took them through so much pain, that has taken them through doctors saying, you've got 6 months to live. I'm sorry, there is no cure for this. And this person still will pick up a book and still will go to the internet and still will get somebody's referral. There is life pushing, just like that little seed pushes through concrete and a plant comes up. Life is pushing through the person all the time, and that's what you want to attach. That's what you want to go ahead and get and give a support to, and then support them emerging out with that. And as they come out with that, then they begin to change their own story about themselves. And when they begin to change their own story about themselves, they begin to write a different biology about themselves, a different story completely. When that lady forgave, when she could forgive, she felt those hands. I'm sorry, I'm using you guys this video, but she felt those hands that were choking her coming out. But she had to revisit it. She had to revisit it so that she could finish digesting an experience that had stayed undigested for so long and was toxic. And what came out of digesting that was then the wisdom of that experience. And then she could let go of all the rest of it. She won't ever repeat that experience again if she can extract the wisdom of it. And that is what they mean by Ayurveda, is the wisdom of life. It's to finish digesting fully. It is not getting the active intellect. It is getting the wisdom. Wisdom you only get in hindsight, only after going through an experience fully. And what we are doing is we don't go through the experience fully. You cannot just go in as an iridologist or as an eye person or a dental person and just look at one part. Because what started out as a thought impulse has gathered critical mass and become an emotion. And what is an emotion has gathered critical mass and has now taken root in the physical body. And in Ayurveda, they'll say that the gross affects the subtle, and the subtle affects the gross, but the subtle affects the gross more. Hence the strength of thought, hence the strength of homeopathy, and of potentized medicine. There is radionics, whatever are the different subtle levels coming. They are extremely, extremely important in how they affect. I want to go through very quickly the causes, according to Ayurveda, of what causes disease in the first place. There are 3 main causes, according to Ayurveda, that creates problems. One is the overindulgence or the misuse of your 5 senses. This is nature's morality to a human being about their health. If you have too much of any one sense, overindulgence of something, you're going to vitiate a certain element combination, and it's going to create an excess force. If that force is too much kapha, it's going to create so much structure in the system that the air cannot move through. And it's going to begin to block vata. If you have too much pitta, you have senses that are extremely stimulated, passionate, and a lot of fire to them. You start to take too much alcohol, too much coffee, all the things that have a lot of fire in them. You're going to start to get volatile. Your temper is going to rise, liver is going to rise, and this will begin to create, sooner or later, create a pathology. You'll find children who are severely screamed at. Their system begins to shut down. They begin to block. They are compensating for all that intrusion with kapha force of structure and blockage. And they'll begin to shut everything down. So an overindulgence of any of the 5 senses, incoming vibrations, will begin to create a pathology in the system. The other reason is something called pragyaparad, and that means our crimes against our own wisdom. How many of us know that, it isn't okay to eat too much ice cream because it's got blah, 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 blah in it? We eat it anyway, don't we? And this is because our body's intelligence and memory is working off of one level, and what we know is working on a different level, and the two are not synchronized and working in a clockwise manner where they're handing the baton to each other. So we often will end up with taking actions that go against what we already know, and this will create a disease. It will create 2 different states, a different mental state and a different physical state. And the third reason is the natural process of breakdown that happens as any form of creation travels through space or travels through time. There is a natural breakdown. And so you will find that somebody who was 20 years old and very vital, by the time they're 80 years old, there's a natural progression of things dispersing. Now there are a very important, and I just want to bring this up. I don't know how you will use this information, but each of you have such wonderful insights and are researching so many different things that I just want to put this out. It's a very basic component of Ayurveda, and they talk about the 5 polarities in Ayurveda. One is the inward moving force, and this carries prana in, life force in. The movement of life force is always in. It is carried in oxygen, and it's always moving in, goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So if you want something to go in, oftentimes with prana, it will go in. This is why they say do some meditation. Because this is just why, but this is one of the reasons why. Because when you're doing meditation and you're putting your attention on that chi, on the prana energy, it is going to go in very deep. And whatever thoughts you put in will go in along with that prana. Now, on this level, people don't really talk of something other than the physical body, but I do want to address that Ayurveda talks about 5 different bodies that a human being has and how they communicate with each other. And you may hear this in New Age language like astral body and etheric body. They talk about the etheric body in homeopathy as well. Some of you talk about it as the energetic body. Some people refer to it as the meridians. But they're all talking about these different dimensions and these different bodies. And one of the most important ways of communicating that occurs between the different bodies happens through light and through vision and sound. And yesterday, Gita, is that her name? The lady, she was talking about this person who's up above how many 100 miles above the earth and finding that DNA gives out light and gives out sound. Well, Ayurveda has recorded these 5,000 years ago of these sounds that are inherent and emitted in the 7 layers of the body, 7 vortexes of the body. And there are these sounds have certain vibrations, and actually the sounds of these vibrations are what the alphabet of the Sanskrit language is made of. And so when you speak the Sanskrit language, it actually stimulates the different endocrine system of the body and creates certain reactions and actions and healings and alignments. And that is why mantra therapy is so important. It's not just la la land from the Guru age, but it's because these are measured vibrations that people are talking about. How is disease caused? The main root of these forces, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, is in the digestive system. Kapha has a propensity to be in the stomach. It is created, generated most in the stomach. On a physical level, it's the amylase that is given. The stomach lining is made up of kapha. It buffers the stomach from the hydrochloric acid, which would be of a pitta nature. Enzymes and hormones in the body are pitta, considered pitta. And pitta, it mainly resides in the small intestine in a person. Of course, it's also there in the pancreas and spleen and liver. And then you have vata force, which is in the large intestine. Now what happens is these forces are generated out of the food that we're eating and in the rhythm of the breath that we're breathing. The actions, the voluntary and involuntary rhythms go on in the body. But what begins to happen is when there is an imbalance, there is an accumulation that begins to happen of these doshas. They naturally accumulate. Kapha will naturally accumulate in the stomach. Well, after it accumulates, if it is not in balance, it will begin to aggravate. And you will end up with symptoms like feeling a little nauseous. With pitta, as the symptoms begin to accumulate, you will begin to just feel uncomfortable. But after they are accumulating, if they accumulated too much, they will aggravate. And then when they are aggravating, you begin to have slight burning, acidity in the system. These kinds of things begin to happen. When you're having too much of the vata force in your body, then you have problems like gas, like dryness, skin dryness, parched, these kinds of problems. If this is not corrected and harmonized while it is still in the digestive system, then these doshas go into another stage. After they've accumulated, they aggravate, and then they begin to overflow. When they begin to overflow, they are now going, for example, pitta will have a propensity to travel along the blood of a person. Kapha will have a propensity to travel along the lymph. And vata is the moving force and will tend to then find, they all start to find, look for a home to set down, to begin to stop a house because they're out of their own home now. And they start to look for wherever there is a weakness in the system, it will house itself there. Now these doshas can really house themselves in any part of the body, but they have a sympathy to house in certain particular areas. So kapha will tend to lodge in the lungs, but that doesn't mean you cannot have kapha type problems. You have kapha type arthritis. You can have kapha in various different levels. Pitta will tend to lodge in the liver, excess, also in the skin. When it's really deep, then you'll start to have deep skin problems. Then you end up with problems like psoriasis, etc. And vata will tend to reside in the bones. And when it resides in the bones, then you have problems, it's air. So you have problems where it's drying up the bones, and you have osteoporosis or all kinds of vata problems. If vata is in the lungs, you have a vata type. You can have a vata type of asthma. So a person coming with asthma is not going to be treated the same way. You're going to see, is it a kapha problem or is it a vata problem? And it'll be the exact opposite. To one, you're going to give moisture. To one, you're going to give moisture-producing herbs that are going to then change their potency and become, and they're demulcent in nature. And the others are going to be pungent in nature. That's going to dry up all that fluid in the body. So you're going to use completely opposite herbs for a kapha and a vata person. Okay, are you all following? Are there any questions so far? Yes.
You said that the kapha travels along the lymph?
Yes.
The pitta, the blood, and vata, is that?
It's air, and it just goes wherever it can.
Okay.
Remember, vata tends to push everything out, you know, and travels any vehicle it can, air. It mostly will travel along spaces. Vata will tend to find a home mostly in the bone marrow, in the bones, and in the brain, in the cerebrospinal fluid. So you'll find people who have Vata-type problems will end up with things like nervous twitches, nerve pains. The type of pain that a Vata person will say they have is very sharp, spasmodic type of pain. That's a typical Vata pain. It has no protection. It has no myelin sheath. So MS, these kinds of problems, you have to begin to create a certain kapha. You know, those dabs of butter we were talking about, that lubrication, that's what a Vata person needs. And one of the best gifts that you can tell a Vata person to do is to go home and take some sesame oil and massage themselves. Because sesame oil has one of the properties of where it sustains through metabolizing to the deepest tissue. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, very much so. You find that if you start to balance, you know, in Ayurveda, eventually they don't go after diseases. I know everybody here is into pathology and you have all your labels and you have your system. But in Ayurveda, you're looking eventually at the cause of a problem and not at the symptom or the outer label. And certainly that'll give you an idea of what kinds of things are happening. But you have to then begin to balance the doshas, and that'll begin to balance a lot of other levels, which I just want to come back to what I was talking about, the overflow of the doshas. Okay? When the dosha overflows and is looking for a place to house, it will then go into the fourth stage, which is where it will relocate. So if Vata finds a space, then that air will get in there and it'll start to live in there and weaken that part. It'll usually find an old injury or a weakened part of our body, and the dosha will begin to relocate there. Slowly, as it sets root there, it begins to house itself there and begins to work that. So that if you have Vata in the thyroid, it now begins to become slowly, lose its vitality, and eventually becomes hypo or hyper, depending on which way it's going. Wherever it relocates, it goes into the deeper tissues of the body. And finally, after it has gone and relocated, it begins to slowly manifest there and eventually differentiates into specific behavior. And that is, it is at that stage that you can say, this is differentiated. It is now rheumatoid arthritis, or it is now asthma. Or you can give it and it is now a disease. But it has to go through all these different stages. And depending on at which stage the dosha is at, where is it relocating still? Is it in a stage of manifesting, or is it in a state of diversification? Accordingly, you will begin to treat that dosha. What Ayurveda does is it has a detox therapy. It has many detox levels. But one of the things that they do is you then begin to look at how to reverse the process, that diversification that has taken place out in an outlying tissue, how to begin to reverse that and begin to bring it back. And they do this by liquefying the toxins that are generating that dosha. You liquefy it and have it flow back into the digestive tract, and then you purge and get the toxins out. This system is called Panchakarma. This Panchakarma is one of the things that I do, and we have some literature in the back, but I just wanted to give you an idea about that process. Yes?
Could you give a little idea of how they treated the radiation poisoning in Chernobyl with the Panchakarma?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how Panchakarma, the process of Panchakarma, and you get an idea of it. And just before I go into that, there's one last thing that I need to explain so that it completes the picture, and I'll come to that question. They say in Ayurveda that when you first eat your food and it's going through the digestion. I was telling you about those 5 polarities, and I just went through one, the one that goes in. That's your prana flow that is going inward. But it's not enough for something to go in. It has to then be absorbed. And that's a centripetal force, that polarity where everything is beginning to go in deeper and deeper and deeper into a state of absorption. And if this does not happen, then your food is just going to go through the digestive tract and come out and not be properly absorbed. So it is this polarity, which is called samana, that actually digests, helps you absorb what you have eaten. It helps you absorb not only what you're eating in terms of food, but what you're eating in terms of experiences. Whatever's coming in, how do you absorb it and how do you digest it? The other polarity then, after absorbing it and digesting it, is that you begin to disperse the energy that has gotten from the process of digestion, and now you have a centrifugal polarity. And it goes to the rest of your body and energizes the body. You know, in Western levels, you call it the circulatory system. That is working with the polarity of Vyana, which is the centrifugal force. And it's so important to know these, because then if you want to give a person a certain remedy, and you know that I want this to go in, or do I want it to go to the extremities, you're going to use the kind of herb that has that kind of a quality to be the carrier for you in order to have that effect. And so it is very important to know these polarities, to say whether you want something to go deeper in or something to go out, whether you want it to break down or whether you want it to build. The fourth polarity is that after energy is dispersed, there is the refined experience that rises. It's lighter. Our inspiration is always lighter. Our wisdom is like, aha, and we light up physically. And that's because it's moving upward. And that is Udana. It's an upward moving air, as they call it. Udana, U-D-A-N-A. And the last one is the one that follows the nature of the forces of gravity. It's called Apana, A-P-A-N-A. And Apana is the force that carries all of the wastes. Wastes are always heavier than what we're using, and all those wastes move with a natural progression of going towards gravity till we finally expel them. Okay, so these 5 forces are there that are always working, and when they're in balance, then they're like a relay baton that is being handed one to the other to the other. When you eat the food for 5 days, in Ayurveda they say that food is turning into the various fluids of the body. So whatever you ate at breakfast 5 days ago is still turning into it's still breaking down more and more finer levels and turning into the fluids of your body. For 10 days, it creates, from 5 to 10 days, your blood is generated out of the food that you've eaten. And the food keeps traveling, breaking down, and turning into the various tissues. The ingredients are withdrawn, and they form these tissues. For 15 days, your muscles are formed. Now, there are other tissues, subsidiary tissues, that go along with these. 20 days it takes for the lipids, for the fat tissue in the body. 25 days for it then to turn to bone, where it has gone through so many different layers of transformation. These are called fires. In India, there's a word called Agni, and they are equivalent to your enzymes, the fires, and the intelligence in the enzyme that breaks it and takes it deeper into and converts it to different levels of the body. And 35 days later, it becomes the marrow and the cerebrospinal fluid. Becomes extremely potentized, and finally turns into the reproductive tissue of the body. And this is important because when you give somebody an herb that is important for the reproduction, reproductive levels. You want to know that what you're giving will, homeopathy is different, but on a gross level, it could take up to 40 days before that first effects are seen of something in the reproductive levels. And so it is very important to know those levels. And finally, after all of these conversions, there is a certain energy that is given off, a vitality that creates the vitality of the person. And this is what generates the immune system, the quality of the immune system in Ayurveda. So you're going to find that if somebody is not converting their first food well into those juices, their later tissues are not going to be very good tissues. And this is why your digestive fire, your digestive system, your enzymes are so, so important and so stressed in Ayurveda about the digestive levels. In Panchakarma, coming back to Vaughn's question, how do they do Panchakarma? Panchakarma means karma is action, and Pancha is five actions. These are 5 actions used to expel toxins. And what you use with Panchakarma is you begin by putting the person on a very simple diet. You do not, you don't make people fast in Panchakarma because people need energy. And you do not detox a person if they are too weak. So always if there's a choice between detoxing or building and the person is weak, you will first go with building and tonifying the person because you need energy to detox. You need energy to do that. And it is after that you first put them on a very simple diet. They're usually eating rice and mung beans because they break down very easily. They form a complete protein. They give energy, and the system can still, all the organs can rest. Nothing complicated that the system is going through. You're using at this time something called ghee, G-H-E-E, which is clarified butter. And the reason you use this is because oil in Ayurveda and the sweet taste is to the body what love is to the soul. Oil creates a connectedness. It's a comfort. You know, when you've had a massage, you're so relaxed. You can just let go. So the idea is you're going to coax the body to release what it is holding on to, and it has gotten stuck with that toxin, whether it's a toxic emotion that is too traumatic, is too fearful to let go, to go beyond it. You have to reassure the body just like you would reassure a spirit. And once the body relaxes, it can release. So you begin with giving them a simple diet, not telling them to fast. You're not doing huge colonics and wiping out the intestinal flora. You're just beginning to simplify. And after that, you start with doing oil therapies. You do herbal oils, various oils that are according to the dosha type of the person. And really at this time, you're not going according to the dosha of the constitution of the person. You're going according to the dosha that is the imbalance of the person. You have to take care of the imbalance, and then sometimes the constitution will get revealed much later. So you don't always worry about that. And the mistake that people do with Ayurveda is that they learn about Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and they go, oh yeah, I'm a Pitta, and so I'm eating all these bitter things, and they have a Vata imbalance, and that bitter is high in air and ether, and they get worse. So you have to follow the imbalance and get the imbalance first. So you use oil, you use medicated herbal oils, you're using heat because you want the pores to open for it to work. The type of massage you're doing works with the flow of the body, and you're using a lot of friction to create heat and expansion and for things to be absorbed better. You're also at this point eating oil, and in it are herbs that will detox. A lot of times they're bitter herbs. You know, when you put bitter taste in your mouth, what is your immediate response is to pucker up and to spit out. Isn't that what you're going to do? If I say, oh, here's an apple, and you take a bite and it's very bitter, or a peach that's really bitter, what are you going to do? You're going to release. So when you take that oil and the oil has these bitter herbs, the oil is creating the lubrication. And it begins to soften the tissue. And remember that in those days, 40 days, it is going deeper and deeper along the different tissues depending on what kind of oil you've used, what kind of herbs you're using. And when it goes into the tissue relaxes with the oil, and then it tastes that bitter herb and it spits out the toxin, which falls into the oil, which is in a liquefied state, and it begins to flow backward. The liquid starts to you're constantly liquefying the toxins. So during Panchakarma, you're using herbs, you're using oils, you're using steam. You have many individualized therapies. You have therapies for the eyes. People who are constantly working on computer, they have dry eyes. There are therapies where you're using oil in the eyes and they feel so rested. You put oil in the brain. You use certain herbs. Depending on if they're kapha, you use mind-clearing herbs. Herbs like tulsi, which is holy basil, it's in the basil family. If they're pitta people with hot, volatile emotions, you're going to use herbs like gotukola, which are very cooling, and sandalwood. And if they're vata people, you're going to use warm and building, strong herbs like ashwagandha, which is an herb that belongs to the ginseng family. Licorice, these are very good vata type of herbs. So you use these levels and you're using all the 5 senses to go in and begin to pacify the dosha and begin to liquefy till it begins to move backwards. And this in a person, depending on what kind of state they're in, how long they've had a problem, can take anywhere from doing a 2-week panchakarma to doing a 6-week panchakarma. And then you use different modalities to expel it. You get things out of the stomach where people actually, you make them throw up. If you have a lot of pitta, it's usually through purgation. And if it's vata dosha, then you're usually using a series of a type of enemas that they do on themselves. But they're always with herbs that create the flow, the polaric flow to accompany the toxins out of the system. Okay?
What would you do with kapha?
With kapha? Kapha people have, in Panchakarma, it's the worst thing for the kapha people. Because kapha people already have so much earth and water. They're the structured people. They're the ones that give you great hugs. They're the cuddlers, you know. And for them, you give them a lot of heat, make them lie down on a hard table. They get to clean up. They're always holding on to things, so they get homework like go clean up, find 10 things that you're going to throw out of your house because they have a hard time letting go. And you would use hot herbs, you know, herbs like ginger, herbs, garlic, gugul. These are kapha type herbs. Okay? Yes?
What is the manual or main thing or most frequently used modality in your healing process?
Let me see if I understood your question. Are you saying what modality do I use in my healing practice?
Yeah, the most often.
Oh, the which force?
Yeah.
I would say that most of the people I see are vata pitta people, both combined, or pitta vata, but I'll get pitta kapha people too. It varies. I would say mostly vata pitta. This tends to be a country that is a vata pitta country. You know, mostly pitta, but that's what I tend to see more. Any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, yeah. Did you have a question?
Thank you so very much for your wonderful presentation. Very coherent, very clear, presenting a rather difficult subject.
Thank you.
You permit in your little folders here in the back, there's a monograph called Human Organism, Oral Cavity and Human Organism. There, I've written some things from Ayurveda specifically about dentistry. So many of the things that colleagues presented about Ayurveda, I put in there very specifically about dentistry. One of the just a commented, I was thinking of when we were listening to Dr. Klingert's presentation to kind of show the nature of the science of Ayurveda and its applications today in our world. We might recall what Dr. Klingert was saying about making this great discovery with the slide with the bacteria on it, you recalled, and then projecting this into the eye. You all recall that? He was speaking about there. In the subtle forces, the subtle nature of the principles that have been discovered and used in a classical medical science of Ayurveda for centuries, as a colleague pointed out. This is something they've been doing for, centuries there. There's a particular type of pitta in the eye called sadaka, and this is so sensitive to the vibrations of matter and material in our environment, which are called tamatras in Sanskrit, that the eye, this concept of the pitta, which is the digestive, what we call in the stomach, the enzymes and the acids and things in our digestive system, it actually says in the old texts in Sanskrit that the eye, this particular part of the eye that Dr. Klingert was speaking about in this phenomenon, digests things. So the eye is actually eating and digesting these impressions, not just impressions of light and color and space and size that we know about from the light, but much more subtle vibrations coming from the very nature of the things. And these go in to what we call the retina, but we might recall that the retina is a photosensitive chemical, yes, which is extremely pitta in nature. And this does things to our entire metabolism, so that this bacteria that we're seeing on this slide, or in reality anything we're seeing with the eye, is not just an association of sizes and time and space and that sort of thing, but is actually a very integral part of our cellular metabolism, which is happening through this particular type of pitta. And I know we didn't, yes, have time to go into all of this, but
thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. And just to complete that thought, Ayurveda is a lifelong study, and to put it in an hour is not always possible. But I will put it out that in the body, not only are there 5 polarities of vata, of the air movement, but there are 5 types of pitta in the body, and they reside in different parts of the body, and 5 types of kapha in the body. So you can just go on and on. There's just a lot more to it. Yes?
I just want to testify that I've had Pancha on 3 different occasions. And one time I was particularly mercury toxic, registered by my IABDM machine. And we were very fortunate to have an outfit that had the first Pancha a week long. It's amazing. Has anyone done Pancha Karma?
Thank you. I don't even know where to go with Pancha Karma, but I want to say that when it's a form of detox therapy, that when people come, they just love it. They are just constantly supported. It's mind-body detoxing. You're releasing emotionally, you're releasing physically, they're doing meditations, but they're not in la-la land. They're like right there, getting very validated, facing all the blocks that they went through and releasing from there, and it's really amazing, day by day as they go through it. They're constantly supported with all the massaging. You get a 2-person massage. 2 people are simultaneously massaging you according to the direction of the flows of the energy in your body. And you come every day for about 3 to 5 hours a day that people are worked on. And it's very, very nourishing and nurturing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a break. You're encouraged to look at the exhibits. This time we're starting 4 o'clock sharp. Yeah, there was somebody left their stuff here yesterday.